A scream tore through the cold morning of December 26, 1996, echoing through the luxurious mansion in Boulder, Colorado. The basement door swung open, a flashlight beam cut through the pitch-black darkness, and there, on the cold cement floor, lay a small, lifeless body. JonBenét Ramsey, the 6-year-old girl with the sparkling crown on the stage of the child beauty pageant, was now a pale figure, wrapped in a white blanket, a rope tied around her neck. The scene was like a slap in the face to the Ramsey family and to the whole of America. An angel murdered in her own home. Before Christmas Eve had even ended, the sound of Christmas bells still echoed somewhere. The whole country was plunged into horrific shock. A seemingly simple case turned into a mysterious maze, lasting for decades, without anyone finding the real culprit. The Ramsey family mansion was brightly lit on the night of December 25th. Outside, the quiet street was blanketed in snow. This was the kind of Christmas that many American families dream of: a glowing tree, overflowing gift boxes, laughter ringing out from every room. Patsy Ramsey, the mother, kept up her elaborate routine, decorating the house like a castle, cooking lavishly, and dressing her daughter JonBenét in a gorgeous red princess dress. John Ramsey, the successful tech dad, was busy entertaining guests and raising a glass to celebrate. Her 10-year-old brother Burke seemed lost in the bustle, focused on his new electronic toy. JonBenét, with her golden hair and sparkling eyes, was the center of attention. She danced around the tree, giggling when people told her she looked like an angel. The adults at the party couldn't stop talking about the beauty pageants she had entered. Many whispered, "She's going to be a big star." No one expected that future to fade away just a few hours later. When the party ended, around midnight, everyone started to leave. The atmosphere in the Ramsey house gradually quieted down, except for the soft sound of Christmas music from the radio in the living room. Patsy took JonBenét to her room, kissed her forehead, and pulled the covers tightly. "Good night, my princess," she whispered. The little girl smiled, her eyes closing in the peace that any child deserves on Christmas Eve. But that peace only lasted a few hours. Around 5:30 the next morning, Patsy woke up, about to go to the kitchen to make coffee. She stopped at the stairs, and her heart stopped. There was a strange envelope on the step. The letter was more than 2 pages long, scrawled with threatening words. Someone claimed to have kidnapped JonBenét, demanding a ransom of $118,000, an odd figure that matched John's year-end bonus. "Do not call the police, or she will die," the note warned. Patsy screamed. The screams woke the house. John rushed downstairs. Burke stumbled out of the room. Panic spread quickly. The once luxurious mansion had become a chaotic maze of pounding footsteps, screaming, and frantic phone calls. The police were called soon after, despite the letter's threats. And it was here that the first mistake occurred, a mistake that would later be cited as evidence of incredible negligence. Instead of sealing off the entire scene, the police let friends, neighbors, priests in and out freely. Traces, evidence, everything was trampled, disturbed like an unwanted party. Someone later sarcastically said, if the killer was standing right there, the police would have invited him in for coffee. Meanwhile, the search for JonBenét began. Every corner was searched, from the bedroom, the attic to the garage. But strangely, no one thought of the basement. It was not until nearly noon, when John Ramsey and a close friend decided to go down to check, that they discovered the horrifying scene. The heavy wooden door opened. The humid air and strange smell rushed into their noses. In the dim light, JonBenét's body appeared, motionless, wrapped in a blanket, her mouth taped, her neck strangled with a rope. John picked up his child, cried out in pain, and ran up the stairs. That scream not only shook the house, but also shocked the whole of America. A child was murdered in his family's mansion, and everyone inside claimed they knew nothing. John Ramsey shook as he held his child in his arms, his face contorted with grief. Screams of terror and panic filled the house. Patsy fainted, collapsing to the floor when she saw her daughter's body. Burke, a 10-year-old boy, panicked and hid in his room, closing the door as if to escape reality. The police present there were completely confused. They had been called to handle a kidnapping case, But now the situation had completely reversed. The victim was dead in the house, and the killer could still be lurking somewhere out there, or right in this mansion. The first few minutes that should have been handled according to standard investigative procedures had slipped into disaster. Instead of keeping the body in place to examine the scene, John, in a state of disorientation, carried JonBenét out of the basement. His tearful embrace, inadvertently, also erased many important traces. The police did not intervene in time, letting emotions overwhelm their work. Forensic experts later shook their heads. This is the moment when everything slipped away from the investigation. The house was packed. Family friends came to comfort them. Curious neighbors crowded the yard. The parish priest was also called to pray. It seemed like a community meeting after Christmas, except for the tray of cookies and coffee. It was hard to believe that a murder scene would be treated like that. Years later, the American press still mocked. If you want to ruin a case, invite the whole neighborhood to see the scene. The Boulder police at that time were not used to dealing with such complicated murders. It was a small, peaceful city where the biggest crime was usually a stolen bicycle or a neighborly argument. Now they were suddenly faced with the death of a famous girl from a wealthy and well-connected family. The burden was so heavy that no one knew where to begin. A young officer stood in the corner, pale-faced, holding a notebook but unable to write a single line. The ransom note became the center of attention. More than 2 pages of text, scribbled in a scrawl, but containing strange details. The ransom of $118,000, the exact amount of the reward John Ramsey had received that year, made many suspect that the killer must have been someone very close to him or someone with inside information. But why leave the body in the house instead of taking it away? Why bother writing a novel-length letter instead of just a few threatening lines? These questions hung like dark clouds over the mansion. While the detectives searched for clues, the press caught wind of the hot story. TV trucks filled the street. Reporters crowded in front of the gate. Cameras zoomed into every corner of the house. The image of the snow-covered mansion, the sparkling Christmas banners, the cold-blooded tragedy inside. All were too perfect for a shocking news report. The news quickly spread across America. JonBenét, who had been familiar to the public thanks to her child beauty pageants, now became the symbol of the most gruesome case of the decade. The private pain of the Ramsey family immediately turned into public entertainment. People competed to discuss, speculate, and make hypotheses. Some sympathized, some were cruel, and many scrutinized every little detail about this family. Patsy, who was famous for being fussy, was now criticized by many, forcing her to compete in beauty pageants, showing off too much, and now John was questioned because of his business and large sums of money. Even Burke, a 10-year-old boy, could not escape the scrutiny. That night, instead of sleeping peacefully, the whole country stayed up with the case. Television channels replayed the ambulance, the police coming and going, the people gathering. On the primitive online forums of that time, a series of comments emerged. Everyone became an unwilling detective. A family tragedy suddenly turned into a national reality TV show. On the morning of the 27th, the scene was finally sealed off more strictly, but it was too late. Many traces had disappeared or been disturbed. The forensic experts arrived late, the police were inexperienced, and the pressure from the media was heavy. All of this pushed the case into chaos. Instead of a straight line leading to the killer, they faced a maze, each turn opening up more mysteries. Meanwhile, JonBenét's body was taken for an autopsy. The initial report was chilling. The girl had been strangled with a rope, there were signs of head trauma, and suspicious details related to sexual abuse. Experts could not agree on whether the cause of death occurred before or after the beating. The contradictions in the autopsy results further stirred public opinion. And of course, the press did not miss the opportunity to exaggerate, with headlines like "Angel Murdered in Her Own Castle" or "Mystery of a Bloody Christmas Eve." Within 24 hours, JonBenét was not only a victim, but also an icon. Photos of her wearing a princess dress, a crown, and a radiant smile were posted everywhere. The contrast between that image and the small body in the basement was even more chilling. An innocent girl, who should have been enjoying a peaceful childhood, was now the center of one of the most thrilling cases in American history. The Ramsey family was caught in a storm. The police asked a series of questions, but John and Patsy were in a state of mental breakdown, giving vague, even contradictory answers. At times, they refused to cooperate, citing their lawyers. This only made the public more suspicious. If they are innocent, why are they so scared? This question was asked repeatedly on television. Burke, a 10-year-old boy, was almost isolated. The police tried to interview him, but his family was fiercely protective. The boy appeared on screen with eyes, sometimes smiling awkwardly out of place. Public opinion was immediately divided. Some believed the boy knew something, others thought it was just the reaction of a shocked child. And so, from one tragic morning, the official investigation began the day after JonBenét's funeral, when the city of Boulder was still immersed in an atmosphere of mourning mixed with public curiosity. The Ramsey house, which had been decorated like a Christmas castle, had now turned into a notorious murder scene. The press camped out in the yard day and night, their lenses focused on the family's every move. The Boulder police, who had never handled a case that had shocked the nation, were immediately put on the defensive. They were criticized for being incompetent, for not controlling the scene from the start, and now had to fend off public pressure while trying to find the killer in a maze of contradictions. In that chaotic atmosphere, the first names to be narrowed down were not a stranger, but the victim's parents. John Ramsey, a successful man in the technology business, suddenly became the #1 suspect. The police paid attention to the detail of the ransom payment, which was exactly the amount of the year-end bonus he had just received. Who but he or a family member could know the number? Why would the blackmailer choose such a strange number, if not to imply inside information? Patsy Ramsey, the famously fastidious mother, could not escape suspicion. The letter was written on paper from a notebook found in the house, and the pen was also taken from the house. This suggested that the killer was either a family member or someone with time to rummage through the house without fear of being discovered. The police leaned toward the first possibility. Someone inside the house knew every nook and cranny too well. The blackmail note quickly became the focus of analysis by investigators. It was unusually long, 3 pages long, filled with incoherent sentences that were both threatening and bizarre. One paragraph read, "If you want to see your daughter alive, put exactly $118,000 in a brown paper bag." This extreme precision made people even more suspicious. Why not 100,000 or 200,000? Easy to remember round numbers. But such a strange number. Linguists were called in to analyze the writing style. They found many absurd details, as if the writer was deliberately confusing the reasoning. But the more the police read, the more they believed that the author of the letter was the woman in the house, because the language resembled Patsy Ramsey's spoken language. A shocking hypothesis emerged. The mother herself had written the letter to cover up the incident. Meanwhile, the Ramsey family kept making contradictory statements. Patsy said that she found the letter on the stairs when she was about to go to the kitchen, but the time she remembered did not match the time the neighbors said they saw the lights on. John insisted that he was completely asleep, not hearing any noise during the night, while the house was quiet. Even the sound of footsteps could be heard in the hallway. Burke, the 10-year-old boy, told one story, the adults told another. At one point, he said he didn't hear his mother screaming in the early morning, but neighbors said they clearly heard screams coming from the Ramsey house. Each testimony was like a missing piece of a puzzle. The more they put it together, the more distorted the picture became. Boulder police held many interrogations, but the Ramsey family hired a famous lawyer to defend them. Every question was answered carefully, sometimes even refused to answer. This immediately raised a wave of suspicion. If they are innocent, why do they need so many lawyers to cover them up? The press headlined loudly. The image of a grieving family gradually gave way to the image of a family full of mystery, coldness, and something wrong. The photos of Patsy sobbing in front of the camera were compared to the fleeting smile when leaving the police station. Public opinion quickly divided. One side thought they were the culprits, the other sympathized with the pain of being wrongly accused. Meanwhile, the police also considered the possibility of an intruder. The basement window had a crack, which appeared to have been forced open. However, the dust and cobwebs on it were undisturbed, leading many experts to believe that this was a fake trace. Moreover, the house had a fairly good security system, making it difficult for anyone to sneak in without being detected. The police returned to the inside person theory, but concrete evidence was lacking. The DNA found on JonBenét's clothes did not match anyone in the family, further confusing the case. The American media did not miss the opportunity to turn the case into a national focus. Talk shows invited experts, lawyers, and even amateur detectives to debate. Tabloids freely created sensational headlines. Beauty queen mother murders daughter, father hides dark secret, 10-year-old boy and the tragedy of a wealthy family. Every day, Americans wake up to a different version of the murder scenario. Instead of being revealed, the truth is buried under a layer of dust and 1,000 theories. The Boulder police have been heavily criticized. They have been accused of being unprofessional, of messing up the crime scene, and of jumping to conclusions about the family as suspects. The small police department has become the target of media attacks. Some reporters have even, if the Boulder police were on a TV show, viewers would have changed the channel on the first episode, quipped one. While public confidence was shaken, ordinary people began to believe in their own abilities. They searched for information, dissected every photo, analyzed every sentence. On online forums, thousands of keyboard detectives debated heatedly, no less fiercely than real-life police officers. John and Patsy tried to protect their public image. They hired media consultants, appeared in television interviews, always asserted their innocence, and called for finding the real culprit. But every time they appeared, public opinion scrutinized every glance, every smile, every tear. At times, Patsy was accused of crying too much, looking like she was acting. At times, John was criticized for being too calm in the pain of losing his child. The harshness of public opinion made any of their actions interpreted as evidence of guilt. The blackmail letter, which was supposed to be the biggest clue, turned into a bitter joke. Copywriters pointed out that it read like a B-movie script, with threats that were more cinematic than realistic. Some of the sentences were even said to be inspired by the famous action films Speed and Dirty Harry. This led to public ridicule. Is the killer a murderer or just a Hollywood fanatic? But despite the satire, the letter still left a huge question mark. Why did it appear? Who wrote it? And what was its real purpose? As time passed, instead of progressing, the case fell into a deadlock. Each step the police took opened up a new path. When everyone was sure that the family was involved, DNA said otherwise. When everyone believed that there was an intruder, the scene contradicted them. The case turned into an elaborate play, with each viewer imagining their own ending. Meanwhile, JonBenét, the little victim, gradually faded into obscurity. The nation was divided into two distinct camps. One side insisted that John and Patsy were guilty, that the family had fabricated the letter to cover up their own internal tragedy, that Burke knew more than the boy said. The other side believed that this was a brutal break-in, that the police were so incompetent that they destroyed all the evidence, and that the Ramseys were doubly victimized. They had lost a child and been smeared. The two sides argued endlessly, turning the case into an endless topic on television, in newspapers, in coffee shops, and at dinner tables. And so, Chapter 2 ended in confusion. No culprit, no answers, only mounting suspicions. The JonBenét Ramsey case officially entered a period of turmoil, where the truth was buried under layers of theories and prejudice. The JonBenét Ramsey case entered its second month without any sign of resolution, and at that time, a series of theories began to explode like fireworks on New Year's Eve. The Boulder police released very little official information, but the press was like a beehive, exploiting every small detail to weave increasingly complex scenarios. Americans, accustomed to thrilling detective movies, suddenly had the opportunity to participate in a real investigation game, right in the middle of everyday life. And they jumped in with enthusiasm that sometimes even exceeded that of the police. The first and most popular theory was still someone in the family. Although the Ramsey family continued to claim innocence, public opinion and many detectives believed that all the clues pointed to them. The blackmail letter was written on paper and pen available in the house. The ransom amount strangely matched John's reward. The body was found in the basement that the family used every day. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to conclude that the killer is not far away. Many believe that Patsy was angry because her daughter wouldn't listen, or because of the pressure of a beauty pageant, and in a moment of insanity, she committed a tragic death. The long letter was just a clumsy cover-up. Others believe that John had a dark secret, and that he had staged the entire scenario to throw her off guard. However, the outsider theory has its appeal. Some believe that an intruder broke into the house on Christmas Eve. The crack in the basement window, though suspected to be old, is still seen by many as evidence. They imagine a pervert, obsessed with beauty pageants, stalking JonBenét and taking advantage of Christmas to strike. The story is creepy, but also plausible to many who don't want to believe that parents could harm their children. The problem was there was no obvious sign of a break-in, and the security system had not picked up anything unusual. Suspicion hung in the balance, with neither side having enough evidence to take the other down. The autopsy, which was supposed to be the trump card, turned out to be a mess. It showed that JonBenét had been strangled with a garrote, a tool made from a string and a paintbrush handle found in the house. That again suggested that the killer had time and tools at hand. However, a head wound led many to believe that she had been beaten first, then strangled to conceal the crime. Unknown DNA was found on the victim's clothing, but it did not match anyone in the family. This was an important detail, but also controversial. Those who believed in the intruder theory saw it as evidence that exonerated the family. Skeptics, on the other hand, said the DNA could have come from the clothing manufacturing process or from cross-contamination. In other words, no one would give in. While the experts argued, the Boulder police made a series of mistakes. Some important evidence was stored incorrectly. Many traces of the crime scene were no longer intact. Their lack of experience caused them to delay DNA testing, missing the golden moment. The media did not miss this opportunity to mock. One tabloid even ran the headline, "If this were CSI, the case would have been solved in 45 minutes. But this is Boulder, so decades have passed. This half-joking, half-serious remark made many people laugh bitterly. The American public, already seething, began to organize themselves into groups of amateur detectives. On online forums, each photo of the crime scene was examined in detail. Some people claimed to see the shadow of a stranger in the photo of the Christmas party. Some analyzed the handwriting in the letter, comparing it to the signatures of Patsy, John, and even Burke. Some groups mapped out the house, simulating the intruder's route. The entire country became a giant investigation lab, where everyone had their own evidence, but no one could actually bring the culprit to light. In the chaos, a controversial theory emerged. Burke, a 10-year-old boy, was the one who caused the tragedy. Some believed that Burke had lost his temper while playing, hit his sister, and that his parents had tried to cover it up by staging a fake crime scene. This theory was based on inconsistencies in Burke's testimony, as well as his unusually cold demeanor in interviews. But the theory was immediately met with fierce criticism. How could a 10-year-old boy create such an elaborate drama? Nevertheless, the story spread rapidly, making Burke the center of scrutiny and leaving him under the shadow of suspicion for years to come. While the Ramsey family struggled to cope, forensic experts debated endlessly. One side asserted that the killer was someone in the house, because all traces pointed there. The other side relied on strange DNA samples to refute. This debate lasted for decades, with countless reports, analyses, and many books published. JonBenét went from a pitiful child to a symbol of the powerlessness of criminal investigations. As time went on, the theories became more and more crazy. Some believed that neighbors were the killers. Some suspected people who had worked for the Ramseys. Some even theorized that a mysterious gang targeted the family for revenge. And in the dark corners of the internet, there was even a bizarre conspiracy theory that JonBenét was never dead, but was hidden to reappear under a different identity. Some went so far as to claim that she was the singer Katy Perry. Although absurd, the theory spread as a twisted form of popular culture, proving how public opinion can turn tragedy into entertainment. As the theory spread, the Ramseys continued to live under the harsh spotlight of the public. They appeared on television to assert their innocence, but each time it backfired. Patsy was accused of acting. John was accused of being too cold. They became targets of both pity and contempt. There was no right path. Crying too much was suspected. Staying calm was criticized. The grief of losing a child was turned into a public spectacle, where spectators pelted stones. Meanwhile, the Boulder police grew increasingly desperate. They found no new leads, and public pressure mounted. Some officers privately admitted that the case had gone beyond their capabilities. This inability made the JonBenét case a barometer. As the years passed, the already scant evidence was eroded by time. DNA analysis improved, but each new result sparked controversy rather than resolution. People began to believe that the case would never be solved, yet it persisted in the collective American imagination. Each new piece of evidence was picked up by the media, the public exploded, and the cycle continued. Chapter 3 ends in a complete stalemate. There are too many theories, too many suspicions, but no facts. The JonBenét Ramsey case, instead of coming to an end, becomes more and more like a maze with no way out. The whole of America, acting as reluctant detectives, continues to indulge in an endless game of speculation, forgetting that behind it all, there is only one truth. A 6-year-old girl was brutally robbed of her life, and justice has yet to find its way back. When a murder case moves beyond the legal realm to become the center of popular culture, it never remains just a case. The case of JonBenét Ramsey is a vivid example of that. Immediately after the tragic death of the 6-year-old girl, not only the police and detectives involved in the investigation, but the entire United States jumped in, as if this were a giant jigsaw puzzle that everyone had the right to touch. The media turned the Ramsey house into a stage, turned the pain into a movie script, and turned the victims' parents into reluctant actors. Every day, the American press published dozens of articles about the case. Late-night talk shows also did not miss the opportunity, inviting psychologists, former police officers, journalists, and even Ramsey's neighbors to discuss. Some programs even recreated the scene on stage, hired a child actor to play JonBenét, with dim lighting and suspenseful background music like a horror movie. The audience, both frightened and curious, sat glued to the screen. Some people sarcastically said, JonBenét will never leave the spotlight. She competed in beauty pageants when she was alive, and she is still being performed in death. Publishers quickly realized the goldmine. A series of books were released, each with a different theory. Some authors asserted that the Ramseys were guilty. Others argued that they were victims of a weak judicial system. These books sold like hotcakes, topping the bestseller list for weeks. Each reader became an expert, ready to debate heatedly in coffee shops, on buses, and at dinner. The case has also spread beyond newspapers and books to movies and music. Several television documentaries have recreated the case in a serious tone, emphasizing the family's tragedy. But at the same time, fictional TV series exploited the dramatic element, sometimes exaggerating to the point of absurdity. There was an episode in the series Law and Order that was directly inspired by the JonBenét case, with a child beauty queen murdered and her family becoming suspects. Viewers watched and related, even though they knew it was fiction. The case became an endless source of inspiration for Hollywood. The internet, even in its infancy in the late 1990s, also contributed to turning the case into a legend. Online forums began to flourish, and one of the hottest topics was JonBenét. Users everywhere shared photos, dissected the blackmail note, analyzed every comma, compared the handwriting to Patsy's letters. A group of netizens even created a website, Justice for JonBenét, updating news and making hypotheses daily. They considered themselves virtual detectives, believing they could find the truth faster than the police. And it's funny how sometimes that seriousness becomes a joke. There was a forum that debated for 200 pages just to decide which type of pen was used in the letter. In that vortex, the Ramsey family was both victim and prey. They had to live under the spotlight of cameras 24/7. Every time they went to church, they were photographed. Every time they went shopping, they were filmed. Some reporters even dug into their trash to find evidence. John and Patsy, already grieving over the loss of their child, now had to brace themselves against a sea of suspicion. But they also learned to use the media to defend themselves, hiring famous lawyers, holding press conferences, appearing in live television interviews. In one interview on CNN, Patsy sobbed and called on the public to find the real culprit. But instead of sympathy, she was criticized as an Oscar actress. The public has lost such trust that any tears are seen as fake. Children in child beauty pageants are also affected. Many parents fear for their children's safety. Some states have called for a review of child beauty pageants, arguing that they subject children to scrutiny. But on the other hand, the number of people watching these pageants has skyrocketed. JonBenét inadvertently has brought the whole child beauty pageant movement into the spotlight. Children are dressed in elaborate makeup and gorgeous dresses, walking on stage, while parents argue in the background whether it is pride or exploitation. The Boulder police continue to be the subject of public satire. On late-night comedy shows, actors make fun of police officers by dressing up as clumsy, awkward police officers standing at a crime scene and dropping evidence. The audience laughs, but it is bitter laughter. It is well known that while the nation was talking, justice for JonBenét remained in the dark. As one commentator put it, "In America, if the police can't solve a case, the media will do it for them." It's not true, but it's at least more interesting. The obsession with JonBenét did not stop at the United States. The international press also joined in. From England to France to Japan, newspapers published details of the case, sometimes embellishing the drama. JonBenét became a global icon, associated with the word mystery. People called her America's mystery girl, like a character out of a detective novel. As the years passed, the case became more deeply ingrained in American culture. It was no longer a criminal investigation, but a collective story, with each person adding a piece of theory, a bit of imagination. It was mentioned in songs, in movies, in satirical comics. Each generation grew up hearing about JonBenét like an urban legend. The name transcended the courtroom, beyond the police report, to symbolize an era when truth and media were so intertwined that they could not be separated. The Ramseys, of course, never escaped this shadow. No matter how hard they tried to prove their innocence, in the eyes of many Americans, they remained forever suspects. Bert grew up under scrutiny, asked about family secrets everywhere she went. Patsy died of illness, still haunted by the fear that she had never been completely exonerated. John lived on, but the Ramsey name was forever associated with the case instead of his career success. And so, the JonBenét Ramsey case not only killed a 6-year-old girl, but also killed the peace of an entire family, killed the faith in the justice system of a city, and cast a haunting shadow across American culture. Every time there was a child murder, people mentioned JonBenét. Every time the media was criticized for exaggerating the tragedy, people mentioned JonBenét. She became a quiet but persistent shadow, never leaving the collective memory. Chapter 4 ends not with a new clue, but with an affirmation. The case has become a part of society, a part of culture, far beyond the scope of the law. And in that part, justice for JonBenét becomes increasingly blurred, overwhelmed by the never-ending noise. Time, the silent but cruelest enemy of any case, has passed mercilessly. Since that fateful Christmas Eve in 1996, America has entered the new millennium. Investigative technology has advanced by leaps and bounds, but the JonBenét Ramsey case has remained like an inoperable tumor. Boulder police and federal agencies have repeatedly declared, "We are making progress," but then remain silent. The public has become accustomed to disappointment. Every time new evidence appears, people are skeptical because they have had their hopes dashed too many times. In the early 2000s, DNA testing technology began to develop rapidly. The strange DNA sample on JonBenét's clothes was reanalyzed using a new, more sensitive method. The results were still confirmed. It did not match anyone in the Ramsey family. This once again fueled controversy. The Ramsey family considered it exculpatory evidence, but the police were cautious, saying that the DNA sample could have come from the production line or from cross-contamination. Some scientists argued, the probability of a random DNA match is extremely low. We can't just blame the factory. The argument dragged on, with no one giving in. Patsy Ramsey, the mother at the center of suspicion, fought cancer. She died in 2006, carrying the pain of losing her child and the label of suspect that was never completely removed. At the funeral, many people still whispered, did she take the secret to the grave? John Ramsey continued to live, trying to clear his family's name, giving interviews, writing books, and calling on the public to reconsider. He asserted, we are victims too. My daughter is dead, and my family has been destroyed by baseless accusations. But the public has become callous to explanations. In the eyes of many, Ramsey will forever be associated with guilt, even though the court has never convicted them. Burke, the boy, grew up under the shadow of suspicion. As an adult, he appeared in a television interview, with a forced smile that made the whole of America shudder. Social networks exploded. Why did he smile when he talked about his sister's death? People forgot that it could just be a psychological defense mechanism and immediately labeled it as evidence. Wherever Burke went, he could not escape the huge shadow of the case. In the following years, a series of documentaries were produced, each offering a different analysis. In 2016, the 20th anniversary of the case, the American media almost resurrected JonBenét. Netflix released a documentary. CBS had its own series. ABC and NBC also joined in. Each film sparked heated debates. A panel of experts in the CBS documentary even concluded that Burke could have been the cause of death, prompting the Ramsey family to sue for compensation. The American public was once again in a heated debate from the bar to the living room. Independent investigators also kept coming up with theories. Some claimed that the killer was a vagrant who had been arrested nearby. Some believed that it was a former employee of John's company. Some even suspected a neighbor. But all of them stopped at the level of maybe no one could provide enough evidence to close the case. Like a trick of fate, each new clue only added more layers to the maze. Modern forensic technology continued to revisit the case. DNA was analyzed further, wounds were digitally simulated. The ransom note was fed into language analysis software. But until today, in 2025, all of them still have not brought a final solution. Each new report only gives the press more reason to make headlines, gives the public more reason to argue, and JonBenét is still just the little girl lying in the basement. What is even more frightening is that the case has become part of America's cultural memory, a symbol of the powerlessness of the law in the face of public and media pressure. When it comes to unsolved cases, JonBenét Ramsey is always at the top of the list, comparable to the Zodiac Killer or the Black Dahlia. The difference is that JonBenét is just a child, a little angel turned into a pawn in the game of power and media. 20, 30 years have passed. America has changed, technology has changed, but every Christmas, JonBenét's name is mentioned again. The press headlines, it's been 25 years, the killer is still at large. Online forums are abuzz with, who killed JonBenét? YouTube channels and true crime podcasts have exploited the case endlessly, turning it into primetime content. The case has somehow become a brand. And so, the tragedy is not just the death of a little girl, but the death of the truth. The truth has been buried under a pile of theories, media profits, and the public's thirst for gratification. JonBenét is no longer a person, but a symbol, a painful symbol of the chaos between law and media. Chapter 5 ends in haunting ambiguity. The real killer may be dead or alive somewhere, watching all this controversy with a cold smile. Justice for JonBenét may not be never come, but her case will forever live in America's memory as a reminder that some mysteries will never be solved. CTA/CTR leads to new case. And if you thought the JonBenét Ramsey case was the only mystery that haunted America, you were wrong. Because just a few years later, the world was shocked by another case, Casey Anthony case, the missing child report. A young mother, a missing child, lies, and a trial of the century. In the next part of this documentary series, we will embark on a journey to explore one of the most controversial cases in modern American history. Back-end index pointing where I don't take your eyes off. Click to watch Part 1, Casey Anthony Case, the Missing Child Report True Crime Documentary, to continue this shocking story series.